Black Op Radio presents 50 Reasons for 50 Years. Why the Warren Commission may be the greatest fraud perpetrated on the American public. Now your host, Len Osanic.
In this episode, we examine the Tippit shooting. Just what did the Warren Commission do with conflicting evidence? They covered it up. They lied about the time of the shooting. They lied about the whereabouts of Lee Oswald. Did you know that more witnesses to the Tippit shooting refused to identify Oswald as the shooter than those who reluctantly did? 10 people said it was not Lee Oswald that they saw, and several saw 2 people. Author, researcher Joseph McBride has spent years looking into the Tippit crime scene. Here are his observations.
This is Joseph McBride. Into the Nightmare is a memoir of my personal investigations of the murders of President Kennedy and Officer Tippit. The Warren Report is full of holes and surprisingly sparse on the Tippit case. The evidence against Oswald, or what he called the so-called evidence, comes down to only 8 proofs. One is that Oswald shot Tippit when he was stopped for suspicion of being a presidential assassin, so therefore he must have shot Kennedy. That illogical claim would not stand up in a court of law, but it has proved effective with people who want to believe the Warren version. The Tippit crime scene in suburban Oak Cliff was a rashomon of conflicting reports and evidence, some credible, some not. Before giving you my best reconstruction of what probably happened on East 10th Street, I will offer 6 proofs that Oswald could not have shot Tippit. First and most importantly, Oswald could not have walked the 9/10 of a mile from his rooming house in time to shoot Tippit. Oswald was seen outside the rooming house at 1:04 p.m. and Tippit was shot at about 1:09. The walk would take 10 or 15 minutes. The Warren Report solved this problem by moving the time of the Tippit shooting forward to, quote, approximately 1:15, unquote. But I interviewed a witness, T.F. Boley, who came upon the scene and looked at his watch shortly after the officer was shot. The watch said 1:10 and the officer was already lying dead in the street. Other witnesses helped establish a similar time frame. 2, the Warren Commission leaned heavily on Helen Markham, who said she saw Oswald shoot Tippit. But she was hysterical and gave such confused testimony that it is likely she arrived on the scene just after the shooting and didn't see it at all. 3, the Warren Report alleged that Tippit pulled over Oswald because Oswald seemed suspicious. The description of a suspect over the police radio could have fit thousands of other men. No one reported Oswald acting suspiciously on the street. He probably was already at the Texas Theater at the time Tippit was shot. Helen Markham said the 2 men had a brief and seemingly friendly conversation before Oswald suddenly shot Tippit. The story makes little sense even if Oswald could be placed there. 4, because Markham was such a poor witness, the commission was forced to rely on the ballistics evidence to link Oswald to the shooting. It claims shells found at the scene matched Oswald's revolver taken from him at the theater. But police officers at the scene reported an automatic weapon was used and found the shells nearby. Shells later placed into evidence supposedly were found elsewhere later. They were for a revolver and were of 2 different brands. They could not be linked with the bullets entered into evidence. The bullets could not be linked with the revolver. The chain of evidence of all these items was suspect. The ballistics evidence fails to prove that Oswald shot Tippit. 5, the Warren Report says Oswald was identified by 12 witnesses at lineups and elsewhere. Those lineups were worthless because they were staged to make it obvious that Oswald was the suspect. 5 of these witnesses identified Oswald months or years later, and 2 of them under duress. The closest witness to the shooting originally refused to identify Oswald. That was Domingo Benavides. The Warren Report doesn't tell you that 10 people refused to identify Oswald as a shooter or as a man fleeing the scene. Some describe men who didn't look like Oswald. 5 witnesses saw 2 men who were involved or may have been involved. 1 witness saw a man leave the shooting in a car. 2 witnesses reported another police car at the scene when Tippit was shot, and another said policemen were already present when she came out of the house after hearing the shots. This was more than 10 minutes before policemen officially arrived at the scene. 6, Tippit was not an unsuspecting cop who just happened to come upon the scene. For 24 minutes before his death, he was hunting down Oswald and driving and dashing more and more frantically around Oak Cliff. What happened when he was shot had something to do with that pursuit. Who was J.D. Tippit? My interviews and archival research showed that he was not the plotting but honest cop and good family man he was portrayed as being. He was a World War II veteran with serious psychological problems. He suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and could not look people in the eye. He was not promoted in his 11 years on the police force because of that problem and because he couldn't pass written tests. He was chronically overextended financially, so he may have been easily malleable. Plus, he was a philanderer who had recently broken up with a mistress who became pregnant 2 months before he died. Her jealous husband was following them around. Tippit worked as a security guard in a restaurant and a movie theater, working for men whose contacts brought him into the milieu of the gangsters, right-wing extremists, and CIA-connected anti-Castro Cubans who made Dallas such a hotbed of anti-Kennedy hatred in 1963. Tippit's father revealed to me that after his son was killed, another Dallas policeman came to his widow, Marie, and told her what had happened. The officers said he and Tippit had been sent by the police department to hunt down Oswald after the assassination. The other officer said he was involved in a traffic accident, but Tippit made it to East 10th Street and was killed. What makes this story so significant is that the Dallas police officially didn't know Oswald's identity until after he was arrested at 1:51 p.m., 42 minutes after Tippit was shot. So that makes Tippit part of a conspiracy to capture or perhaps kill the scapegoat in the assassination. Tippit was staking out the viaduct from downtown, but took off at a high rate of speed when no Oswald appeared. He then stopped a car, looked in the back seat, and took off again. He next was seen at a record store frantically making a phone call, saying nothing and dashing off. He was killed minutes later. Credible evidence indicates that another policeman who had parked his squad car in the alley near where Tippit had parked was involved in the incident on East 10th, along with a gunman who fled back toward the second police car in the alley. Another accomplice ran in a different direction. A fourth man was seen behaving suspiciously. Tippit drove into an ambush. His killing was an execution. So why was Tippit shot? This may have been a cynical maneuver to draw hordes of police from downtown into Oak Cliff to capture or kill the patsy. But perhaps there is a deeper logic. Some people think Tippit was shot by the jealous husband of his mistress. But it's likely that Tippit was killed by fellow conspirators in the plot against the president. The Warren Commission's David Bellin called the Tippit murder the Rosetta Stone of the entire case. I believe it is, though not for the reasons Bellin thought. A witness heard a man fleeing the shooting mutter either "poor dumb cop" or "poor damn cop." So was J.D. Tippit a poor dumb cop who blundered into being shot, or a poor damn cop who may have been shot because of his own conspiratorial actions? The evidence I have found clearly supports the conclusion speculated upon earlier by other researchers that Tippit was hunting down Oswald. This is evidence that Tippit was part of the conspiracy, at least to capture or kill the scapegoat. We may never know all of what happened to him 50 years ago, but my research in Into the Nightmare indicates that this poor damn cop was a more central and more culpable figure than we had previously understood in the events of November 22nd, 1963.
Stay tuned for the next installment as we expose week after week 50 lies the Warren Commission would like you to believe.